All set. I'd like to call this meeting to order, the Connectivity Committee meeting, Thursday, December the 16th, already 1 o'clock. Welcome, everyone. First item up is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any additions, corrections? Everyone happy with it? If you are, entertain a motion to approve it, please.
Jagger, I'll move.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Mike, thank you. I'll ask Catherine to call the vote, please.
Deputy Warden. Mike Andrews.
Yes.
Councillor Jagger.
Yes.
Justin Pennings. Justin Pennings. I'm not sure if he hears.
Can you hear us, Justin?
Sorry, guys, I think I'm having audio issues. I'm only hearing a couple of people.
We're approving the agenda, if you're happy with it. Obviously not hearing me.
Oh, maybe if you ask him to put his hand up. Deputy Warden Marks.
Yes.
3-1, the motion is carried.
All right, thank you. And I should note that we have Warden Mary French here with us. Welcome, Mary. Mary's here to observe, but certainly welcome.
Thank you.
Item 2 is adoption of our minutes from September the 9th. Seems like quite a while ago, but it has been. So has everyone had a chance to read them? If you're satisfied, I'll entertain a motion to adopt them.
I would so move, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike and Dominique. Catherine, go ahead with the vote, please.
Mike Andrews.
Yes.
Councillor Jagger.
Yes.
Justin Pennings. Deputy Warden Marks.
Yes.
3-1, the motion is carried.
Thank you for that. Remind everyone of disclosure of pecuniary interests and the general nature thereof. And note that there are none. Thank you. And we have a presentation from the IBI engagement. And we'll start off with the Director of Information Technology Services. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, we just have a quick presentation to bring everybody on the committee up to speed. As Mr. Chair pointed out, it has been a considerable amount of time since our last meeting. Just want to ensure that we are all up to speed on the engagement we have undertaken with IBI. So next slide, please. So a little bit of background. So as we all know, the County of Elgin has prioritized providing reliable, affordable, high-speed internet for its residents and businesses. We did engage IBI Group to complete an analysis of current state, and they will be providing us with recommendations for future state. The final report, which will be presented today in a draft format, will be a valuable tool for all activities related to internet connectivity in Elgin County moving forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I just put a quick timeline together of the meetings that we've kind of undergone. So back in May, the project was awarded to IBI. In June 17th, we had a presentation from IBI where we met them and we did an analysis of data and local resources. Following that, in July, we had a presentation that outlined the current state of rural broadband in the county. That was presentation 2.1, I suppose, because there was two parts to that presentation. So they followed that up in August, on August 26th, which expanded upon the current state and provided more detail around technical and funding options. And then on September 9th, they did another follow-up, which clarified some of the funding options, as well as some questions we had around accessing towers, things like that. Next slide, please. So report one was presented on June 17th. IBI, like I said, provided an analysis of data and the local resources that would be used to establish current state. The committee expressed some concerns about the validity and accuracy of the data. So we undertook an additional survey to gather more accurate data. And data from that survey was used by IBI, and IBI also engaged some local resources to validate the current state findings. So, next slide, please. So then IBI presented to the committee on July 22nd a initial current state assessment, which highlighted the underserved and unserved premises and road segments. And the committee directed IBI to develop both technical and funding options to address the gaps that have been highlighted through this assessment. Next slide. So again, IBI presented to the committee on August 26th and outlined technical options, which included fiber to each premise, as well as fiber to fixed wireless towers. IBI also outlined funding options, including the accelerated high-speed internet program. So again, the committee expressed some concerns about how we would access existing towers and requested clarification on that process. The committee also requested more information on accessing funding, and county staff completed a confidentiality agreement to gain access to the accelerated high-speed internet program. Next slide. So IBI returned and they were able to provide some more information on how we would work with Rogers, Bell, and tower owners to gain access to them, including arbitration if that was required. And they also provided a little bit more information on funding options, but we were told at that time that without the NDA, there was a limited amount of data that could be talked about at that point in time. So the committee requested that IBI finalize the discussion paper and presentation and present to the committee for final feedback prior to presenting to council. And that's where we're at now. So today they'll be presenting these recommendations to the committee for review. The committee will review these recommendations and provide direction to IBI and staff regarding any required changes. And IBI will update this document accordingly. And when the committee is happy with this documentation, recommendations will be presented to council. This report that IBI will be finalizing will be a valuable tool in all future initiatives regarding internet connectivity in Elgin County. So I think that brings us kind of up to date with what our engagement has been with IBI. Are there any questions before we turn the floor over to Keith and John?
Thank you, Jeff. A good summary to refresh our memories because it has been a while, but thank you for that. We'll note that we've been joined by Mayor McPhail, so welcome, Duncan. We just got started before your arrival, so do we have any questions for Jeff? Dominique, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question on Ontario Connects, and I don't know if you can answer that, but do you know if it's for fiber only, or is it sort of are those who will apply able to propose whatever is the best solution for each area?
So with regards to through you.
Go ahead.
The accelerated high-speed internet program, the lots are specific to wired or wireless. So there are two lots that pertain to Elgin County. One is wired and one is wireless. So those individuals that would be bidding on those lots, they do not, under its current structure, they do not have a choice whether it be wired or wireless. It's stipulated in the actual program.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments? Duncan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wondering, Jeff, as we discussed at the council meeting the other day, were you able to gain any more information on Bell's initiative in Western Elgin as they're going door to door trying to solicit subscribers to high-speed internet and to TV off their bell towers?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I have put a couple calls out and email out to Bell. I've not gotten anything back. I was hoping to touch base with you on that today. Wondering if they left any literature with anyone. I'm going to try to follow up more with them, but I haven't got any more data on that right now, no.
I tried to gain as much information as I could from the individual that was around representing Bell. Certainly he didn't know any technical component of it. And as I was already serviced by another carrier, I really wasn't overly interested in what he had to offer. But I did talk to my road superintendent today, and he has just recently subscribed to the service. He lives in Chatham, Kent, so I don't know how far reaching the service is. And he did mention something about they had put up a new tower or something. So whether that, and I guess where I'm going with this, whether how much that changes the overall research that IBI has done, because we now have a new player in the game here that, like I say, we don't know what their coverage area is. So something that probably we're going down a rabbit hole that maybe there is no answers to. So, but they are actively out recruiting.
And I've heard the same, and trouble with that, well, it's good for Bell, but that eliminates any competition because it's all or one or all or nothing sort of thing. But further comments? All right, Jeff, do you want to introduce our guests? Are we ready for their presentation? Gentlemen, welcome. Keith and John?
It is John. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Memory's there, it's just a little slow, but welcome. Whenever you're ready.
John or George, he's got two first names. All right, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with you again today. Today we are here to focus the discussion around the recommendations that have been developed. There are a few slides in this presentation that give us a quick recap, since it has been a few months since we've talked about these topics. I intend to go through them fairly quickly because it is material that we've presented and discussed at this committee prior. But it will help set the context for the focus of this discussion, which is around recommendations and developments around the Ontario Connects program. So let's jump in. If we could advance to the next slide. So yes, those are the agenda items. We'll jump straight into the next slide, which is the recap, or a bit of context, sorry. And of course, draft recommendations provided for consideration and discussion to this committee and feedback. Next slide. So the assessment of served versus underserved has been completed. As I'm sure we can all appreciate, it is a point in time assessment as new providers enter the market or decide to offer services or build infrastructure. It does change and transform over time. If we could move to the next slide, we'll talk about the summary. It's certainly in terms of the numbers, and we kind of have to parse through them to get to the answer here and true root of the most severe problem, is that the most rural areas of the county are quite severely underserved by a dwelling on a dwelling count basis and even a road length basis if we want to use two different measuring sticks to get to the same conclusion. Certainly, as we would expect, more urban areas where the business case is more positive for the commercial market have better service than the more rural areas, which would require some form of subsidy and public money to advance broadband into those areas. Next slide. So as a recap, we did assess the options in terms of a full fiber to the home solution, fiber to the home and business. It does come with a large price tag. It is an asset that has a long life, typically 30 years or more. And programs like this would be executed on a longer time scale, as with other high cost infrastructure. The yearly affordability is always an issue, but would be executed under a long-term plan to build out the infrastructure. So this was one option that was developed. The next slide talks about a more modestly priced option in terms of a fiber backbone to fixed wireless locations that would involve using existing towers from service providers that would be available to provide wireless type services to many more rural areas within county. So this, doesn't have the same longevity as a fiber-based solution, but if we go to the next slide, comes at a much more affordable price. Sorry, not this slide where the price is, but the next one coming. Two more. There we go. Thank you. Again, more modestly priced. Less benefits in terms of longevity, but certainly more affordable and more able to deploy rapidly. I'll move on to the next slide in the presentation. All right. Right. So just more on the capital cost per premise is a key metric. Dramatically different price point there. It is a service that would improve broadband performance from the existing current state. But I would suggest it's probably not your long-term 30-year end state vision, and but it would take some steps or it would allow you to take more immediate steps to improve broadband. So in summary, the options are presented here in terms of a recap. The long-term vision certainly is our guidance would be to bias you towards a fiber investment. It brings some of the transformative level economic benefits that we see in terms of broadband infrastructure, being able to work, educate, and receive healthcare from home versus a wireless connection, which of course brings some of those benefits, but more sort of catches up people to a base minimum standard rather than a fiber-based solution that leapfrogs current technologies and provides services that will have a much longer horizon in terms of its ability to perform and scale to future speeds. Moving on to grant funding options. We, at the time, were developing this material. The Ontario Connects program was just in the process of being launched and structured. It is structured in the form of a reverse auction and in the form of prescribed lots with geographic boundaries targeted to either a wireline, namely fiber solutions, or wireless solutions. It sits, I'll say, either you could call it either on top or beside of all of these other programs that are available to fund broadband. Certainly the size and the scope of the Ontario Connects program has I'll say put somewhat of uh, a bit of a pause in terms of wanting to see outcomes from this program before additional investments are made, just by the very nature of its size and scale. So if we move into the next slide, the most current information, and this is as of November 30th, a pre-qualification process has been done and completed by Infrastructure Ontario. They have publicly announced the names of the service providers that are qualified to move on to the bidding stage. A couple comments that there are a number of additional financial hurdles that need to be fulfilled by each of these in order to actually bid. At the auction. And sorry, I'm just going to get rid of an incoming call. So my comment would be that not everyone you see at this list may end up being a direct participant at the auction. There will likely be consortiums and partnerships formed. Sorry, one moment. And the notably left off the list were a couple of areas, regions, in fact, that had applied, but Infrastructure Ontario chose not to bring them forward. So it speaks, I think, to the need for, we're going to talk about recommendations soon, but these are all private sector companies, and it reinforces the need for advocacy and outreach to the private sector to ensure that individual regional objectives are met as these parties move forward and formulate their bidding strategies. There's a lot of subsidy dollars that are available. Each of them will bring their own bidding strategies to the auction, and they will each have I'll say a limited wallet in terms of how their funding allocations to bid and their priorities to bid on. So it is certainly the time to be active and advocate prior to the actual auction process occurring. So moving into the recommendations, and these are in draft for discussion. Certainly bubbled up to the top, it is the need for advocacy in terms of outreach to the private sector, as well as what we've called strategic purchasing and coordination. This means really that as the public sector is a consumer of broadband services and one of the larger consumers of broadband services to operate all the things that you deliver as a county, it would be important to focus your procurement such that your chosen supplier or suppliers of ISP services for yourselves are also aligned with your strategic objectives in terms of improving broadband connectivity to the underserved areas of the county. You do have leverage with the dollars that you spend, and it is important to have a focused discussion through all the tiers of public sector spending and procurement to help you improve value for money in terms of purchasing ISP services. The So that is recommendation one, and that certainly we feel is could be executed by having a senior staff person added, and or accomplished through a number of different staffing arrangements as you see fit. But it is important to have that person whose primary job is advocacy, coordination, and helping you move the strategy forward overall. This will be as important as the Ontario Connects program moves through its auction process and winners of the auction are announced, and as priorities are assessed by the parties that are funded for improvement within Elgin County. Moving into recommendation two, we do feel that the best long-term vision and use of public funds is to have a vision of building fiber to the home. This is not a short journey. It's not an inexpensive journey, and it will likely be accelerated by the outcome of the Ontario Connects program. So it combined with the advocacy role, it's going to be important to understand out of the auction process what is funded and what was not, and where can the county overlay additional emphasis and perhaps dollars to further extend the outcome of the auction and the service providers that are able to move forward. The vision is important and aligned with other infrastructure investments, such as investments in road improvements, bridges, etc. Having a fiber vision alongside that will dramatically reduce costs in the long term by allowing you to coordinate what we call dig once activities, where infrastructure is placed at the time of any linear asset construction, whether it be roads, bridges, water and wastewater systems. Those are all important activities to coordinate and ensure that broadband is effectively, I'll say, baked into any construction program of that nature. Recommendation three, again, staged somewhat and dependent on the outcome of the Ontario Connects program. This may be as I alluded to earlier, a lower cost and a quicker time to provide improvements into areas that that are not identified and funded through Ontario Connects. This is a complementary strategy to a fiber to the home strategy and a progressive strategy where initial builds may target certain radio towers to provide a more immediate and cost-effective improvement that future fiber programs would eventually build out, and the radio equipment could be redeployed in other areas where it was required. So the numbers here are again on a county-wide view. And somewhat absent of understanding what the outcomes will be out of Ontario Connects, would need to be adjusted based on advocacy and understanding the outcomes of the Ontario Connects program auction. Finally, recommendation four, again, a bit of an overlay, but it's very important, I think, for municipalities to take the longer term vision. You operate at many geographic locations, both in terms of administration centers and operational centers, as well as water system and strategic municipal infrastructure that you operate. Having a fiber-based connectivity for your own needs, essentially to reduce your operating costs and become one of the anchor investors in fiber in the county, is important in the long term. It provides you with a stable infrastructure that will serve you many years, decades into the future, and is complementary to other recommendations presented. So that this is more just focusing on municipal locations and other public sector areas of interest that have a long-term connectivity requirement. So thus ends the formal presentation of the recommendations, and certainly eager to hear feedback and comments as we move to finalize this and bring this forward to council.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the report, presentation. I'll open the floor to comments, questions. I guess I have one, Keith. The funding from Infrastructure Ontario, is there any flexibility there, or are they set in stone?
Maybe interpret if I'm interpreting the question correctly, the auction lots have been defined, I'll say lines drawn on maps and funding envelopes allocated. Really, the true outcome of the funding will depend on the auction process and whether the reserve bids are met. I think it is possible there's a scenario where some of the auction lots do not get awarded because the minimum, the floor price wasn't met. But that's sort of a bigger picture Ontario discussion of how each service provider sees it and where they would allocate their money at the auction.
Duncan?
One of the concerns that I have growing in the back of my mind is, and I can only speak for West Elgin as an example, is that certainly the low-hanging fruit, i.e. the more compact villages, that has already been picked. What I'm seeing with, again, Bell Canada going out and looking as subscribing the next level of low-hanging fruit, then as it all kind of moves on that way, it concerns me that when the dust all settles, there still will be those individuals that are left out there that for one reason or another are not able to subscribe to anything. And as the more of the public is picked up by other providers, where do we find the public support to be able to fund those individuals that don't have the opportunity for being able to sign up to a sustainable service? As time moves on here, I think that the easy pickings are just going to keep getting eroded away. Don't know if there's a question in there or not, but is it something that from the consultants that we should be concerned about?
Well, certainly over time, you're completely correct. Commercial operators are driven by their shareholders and their commitments to run a profitable business and generate a return on capital. That is somewhat in contrast with many public policy objectives of improving the quality of life, especially for rural residents. Quite frankly, the private sector business case just isn't there and likely will never be there. So there is a need for public money. And in my opinion, it's important to scope projects large enough that include some of the, if we're using a fruit analogy, some of the sweet and ripe fruit, along with some of the areas that will never be sweet or ripe. That in order to put them in a basket together, in order to have an overall sustainable program, rather than just having the public sector left to deal with the worst of the worst in terms of business cases and investment.
That's what I'm concerned about, is ending up that the public component will be doing exactly that, dealing the worst of the worst. The only other option that I guess when it comes down to the price point, if it's something that you can be more than competitive with supplying the service, people will shift, I think, to the lowest common denominator. So, yeah, it's as always, it's not an easy thing to fix, but it just worries me that there are going to be individuals for one reason or another, depending on their location or whatever, that the actual ability to have sustainable broadband is, if we're looking at 30 years down the road, if you take a look at someone that is, he is born today and we're talking 30 years down the road, they'll be long gone and married and moving and living somewhere else before that actually takes place. So I know I haven't got 30 years.
Keith, did I hear you say the water towers are a very valuable resource and there's advantages for them to be used? And I believe most of them are, with the exception of the municipality that I'm deputy mayor of. And I guess their indication was that they weren't interested. I think you're saying that probably because it's such a excellent resource, there should be maybe another attempt to show them why they should be participating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, water towers and, what we call in the industry, any vertical real estate, and that could be extended to even, taller structures, buildings, anything within the public sector domain and authority it does have some value. Of course, we need to respect certain, I'll say engineering and limitations of the structure itself. But it is certainly can become a valuable tool to either improve broadband directly by the county or in partnership with a private sector provider who would be granted access onto the tower.
Absolutely, assets the municipality owns need to be protected, but if that is the first assumption, but if you can work around that, I would suggest all water towers need to have a good hard look at their availability, I guess, but I'll leave it at that. Further, Mike, go ahead.
Keith, do we have any idea on the timelines with Ontario Connects, both with the auction and the awards part of it, and then subsequent to that, any project timeline expectations? I've seen nothing on that, but I haven't actually been into the actual
Sure.
lead of this thing, so.
Right. I'm gonna answer a little bit carefully because I'm not quite sure what's been placed in the public domain versus still under non-disclosure. I can, I understand that the qualified bidders have been provided a very extensive information package and qualifications process on the order of, hundreds, if not thousands of pages to consider and go through. I understand that the timelines to run through the next stage of it is happening fairly rapidly, I'll say in the February timeframe. And I know that publicly, I think the Ontario government had wanted to be in a stage to announce projects and awards by mid-year of 2022.
Okay, I'm actually pleased to see in your draft recommendations that almost any, with the exception of the first recommendation, is a wait and see. Again, timeframes, if we're talking 2022, then a wait and see is probably definitely the right approach. If we're talking 23, 24, then I would say not so much. So I would like to make that comment. The other thing that I will say is I'm also encouraged with the emphasis that LBI has put on ultimate fiber option. I'm unabashedly biased towards fiber for a number of reasons, and I think the least of that is the longevity aspect of it. I always have quality of service concerns with wireless. Wireless has and will continue to be a great element in filling these gaps, but there are quality of service issues that will not be present with fiber. Longevity is another one, and as much as I know, I think in a previous meeting you've assured me about the coverage calculations, but again, they're theoretical. I see anytime I see something that suggests that we have 100% coverage of the unserved, I don't believe that. I don't think anyone really believes that, even though it looks like that on paper. But it is theoretical. So I think the fiber bias that I have, I think is a correct bias, and I am encouraged that seems to be also the conclusion of IBI. And there again, wireless still will have a role to play, I'm sure, in filling gaps, not just in Elgin, but across the province. But one last comment, I'm not trying to monopolize here, but I can't remember whether we chatted about this previously or not, but in your wireless backbone option, most of the locations that you're indicating for towers, fiber is either already at those locations or in very close proximity. And whether there's capacity on those fiber links is a question. Whether anyone would be able to access that capacity, if it was, there's another question. But utilizing that is somewhat self-defeating in a way, because you also are then not going to serve those customers along any proposed fiber interconnection of the tower. So it's kind of a catch-22, but it may be an option 3B, if you will, or 3A, if you will, as another step in the direction, if you will.
Right, right. Yes, if I could respond to your last comment, certainly one of the most frustrating things about rural broadband is that it's understood that there is actual fiber optic infrastructure to locations, but the owners of that fiber infrastructure have chosen, as it is a private asset, not to make it available for other services or to make it available for third parties to use. There are some bigger industry regulatory proceedings going on to change that state. But unfortunately, in order to actually utilize that fiber to serve both residents along the way to the tower and the tower itself, as a pragmatic approach, we costed out the need to build it in a public sector framework.
Dominique?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple questions, and also I'm guessing as a committee, we're not trying to identify perhaps the recommendations to council. Is the idea just to bring the report as is, or to also express an opinion on the recommendations?
Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. I'd recommend that, since the committee has done a ton of work in this area, that if possible, you share your recommendations with council.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for clarifying that. So I'll ask a couple questions then to continue to form my opinion. As far as the first recommendation regarding a champion or an advocate, have you seen that role in other municipalities, and have you seen the success and the potential impact, positive impact it can have?
Yes, if I may, and each of these initiatives does require, I'll say, a singularly focused resource. It often starts out as something being worked on the side of the desk of either economic development or IT, which is normally where it starts, because those two either have the most technical expertise or the most incentive to improve the state of connectivity. I often, somewhat what humorously say that each community and area needs a champion, and it doesn't necessarily mean someone showing up with a costume and an S on their chest as being the superhero, but it needs that single point of accountability and focus to drive initiatives and build some of those personal relationships with private sector in order to articulate the need, as well as to drive policy through the many tiers of administration and help focus purchasing and procurement activities in a single direction.
And a follow-up question, the conference, I think it was called the conference on Monday on rural broadband, there was a significant emphasis on supplies, so that even if you have shovel-ready projects, we might run into significant delays anyway. So that's why I have the same question as Mike in terms of Ontario Connects and whether they've already tried to establish some time frame, because I'm wondering if we're comparing different programs. Like I know the 5 to 10 year recommendation, for example, feels like so long and so far away that it doesn't appeal probably certainly to our ratepayers who have tasked us to try to act quickly. But I'm wondering, even if other funding programs attempt to move faster, is it likely that they'll run into just feasibility, period?
Yeah, good comment and question. Certainly, supply chain is a very hot topic in the industry right now. What we're doing in Canada, of course, pales in comparison to what's just been announced south of our border, in terms of a $65 billion commitment to improve broadband infrastructure in the US. We've seen these supply shortages before. I'll say I've seen them before in my career. What tends to happen in the short term is that there is a price spike. There's that scarcity mentality, and the major carriers start to buy up commitments from suppliers years out, and prices go up. What I also know to be true is that tends to spur manufacturing to bring more factories and more capacity online. And while it feels like you're fighting for the last roll of toilet paper at Costco right now, there will be somewhat of a correction back to normal. But the major players of the world do have long-term relationships, and they will simply ask their suppliers to commit their entire production to them for a number of years until the supply crisis wanes. So I don't think it's as bad as we're all hearing it is, but there will be a short-term price spike and perhaps some short-term delivery issues.
Thank you for that.
I've got Duncan, then Mike.
Just wondering on the funding side of this, has there been any jurisdiction, and I don't know whether this is possible or not, whereas the capital upfront cost, can this be viewed like a local improvement to the residents, where there's a frontage charge for fiber going by their property, and that there's a charge that is put to each property that the individual has possibly the opportunity to amortize that over a 10 or 20-year period? Has there ever been anybody has ever done that?
Certainly, I certainly am not a municipal government act taxation expert, but certainly, in general, it is possible to overlay or allocate costs directly to a geographic area. I have also seen programs in some jurisdictions where there has been partnerships developed with local banking, credit union, financing organizations, where rural property owners that are being asked to pay an installation charge, if you like, usually something in the order of $5,000 or $10,000 per property, are partnered with a financing organization and in effect loaned that money over a 10 or 20-year period attached to title on the property, such that those that can't fund an initial upfront installation fee still have a mechanism to participate and pay it back over time, or pay out the loan with the sale of their property if that occurs, such that it's not a barrier to contribute, but also also provides for that opportunity at time of construction to connect all the properties along the route that's chosen.
Well, certainly, I think anyone that has a piece of property that has the ability for direct connect to fiber, that property certainly is of a higher value than something that does not have that capability.
Yes, in fact, I work with many rural areas across the country, and it's usually the number 3 question that sellers of a property face. What's the price of the property? What are the taxes? And how's the broadband? Especially in a COVID era, it's a primary consideration for purchasers. And other studies south of the border have suggested that it brings at least a 4% lift to property value, if not more, depending on the location. So it definitely adds to the value of the property, much like the way a paved road and access to the property would in a different way. But it is, and there are several property owners that are more than willing to pay. We've had experiences where property owners are approaching construction crews directly at time of construction saying, I'm willing to write a check if you're willing to bring it into my property. So it's there's definitely that level of demand in the community.
And I think that's going to be the ultimate challenge that this committee has and also council has, because certainly we've gone through the process of having a look at what we need and certainly some options of how to provide that. The big question is going to be, how are we going to fund it? And I think that at some point in time, that question is going to have to be asked, and there's going to have to be an answer goes along with it. So probably sooner than later, that's going to be the question of the day.
Thank you. I think, Mike, you're next.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to add a little more, I guess, color to Dominique's question about supply chain, and I do agree with what Keith said. I'm not so sure. I didn't want to leave this committee believing that it was a short-term issue, because I truly think it is not a short-term issue. We heard, I think, Dominique, we heard on that conference the other day, a 3 to 5 year timeline. Even I'm not sure it's going to be that long, but it just speaking from personal experience, we have some pretty routine fiber equipment that we have used and deployed that we are now looking at 1 year lead times on, which historically were 5-6 weeks lead times. And I've already been told by 2 suppliers that if I don't have pipe ordered now for 2022, I won't see any pipe in 2022. It would be 2023. So I think this supply chain issue and shortage issue it's going to carry on for not months, a number of years. One thing that wasn't discussed at that, at least I didn't hear it at that session on Monday, is also the contract side of things. There are a limited number of utility contractors, and we just saw recently, I think probably lots of people saw it, but in the last few weeks, one of the Ontario contractors that had been awarded quite a lot of the SWIFT work is run up the flag and advised that they're not going to be doing that contract. In fact, I think they even backed away from their commitments under SWIFT. So I think that's going to be just as serious, if not more so, than the actual material challenges that are ahead of whoever wins these Ontario Connect. And even if the county itself has to do something going forward, there just aren't people out there to do this work, let alone put the materials in. So short-term fixes are going to be very, very difficult to achieve, I think, in the near term.
Thank you, Mike. Further comments? Dominique, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if we're at this stage yet, but I will offer my opinion on the recommendations. When I look back at our Maiden Elgin strategy, and what could possibly be the best role and most effective role for the county, I'm leaning towards option 1. And I think that's option 1 in terms of the FTE and the, a person focused solution, because I look at, just in the past few months, it just feels like we're I don't know if blindsided is too strong a word, but it constantly surprises anyway, that even in West Elgin, at the beginning of this meeting, we were talking about suddenly Bell is knocking on doors and there's a new tower and we're having trouble finding information. And so we're constantly chasing information. The Ontario Connects was a bit of a surprise, I think. So to have someone dedicated to try to stay ahead, and as soon as you hear something, to have someone dedicated to, you know, chasing that story, so to speak, and bringing that information back and then advocating for, okay, I hear you're coming our way, so this is what we need. Look at our data. This committee talked about the need for boots on the ground to, you know, do some ground truthing or whatever the term is. At some point, I could see that role doing some of that as well, and actually being a partner to ISPs to say, we can help you. We have some, you know, real data, and do that advocacy. I mean, I could go on, and that model, I think, that we looked at in terms of there's also a role for educating our residents on what's available, who's available, and building that digital capacity, which I think makes it more attractive for ISPs to come in. So having that, playing that two-way communication role. So not just being ISPs driven, but also talking to residents and informing them of options, which at that point gathers data, which we can then feed back to ISPs and show them that there is a lot of interest in certain areas, and perhaps there is a business case that they had not thought of. So yeah, I think because all the other options, I think will continuously have surprises of either business interests or government fundings or different programs, and we'll never be able to catch up, or that shouldn't be our role anyway. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Dominique. More comments? All right, where are we at? Next steps? Do we want to go home and think, or do you want to make a decision today? Are we ready? When I say a decision, a recommendation.
Just,
Go ahead, Dunk.
yes, Mr. Chairman, it's just, yeah, you know, I feel so frustrated that dealing with all these ISPs. I compare it that, yes, you can go in the room with all the ISPs, but the lights are out. You don't know who's in the room, you don't know what they're doing, and they're very hesitant to turn any lights on so you can see what's happening. It's going to make that individual's job very, very difficult to be able to gain any information other than maybe some of the local fellows that are working. I imagine maybe will be more receptive of laying their plans out. But, you know, any of the big players, you know, it's under the cone of silence and darkness that things seem to be going on. And you only learn something by, in my situation, someone coming and knocking at the door saying, would you like to sign up for a high-speed internet? And even their high-speed internet is 25 speed. So how you find a needle in the haystack in a dark room, I haven't got that sorted out yet.
Is it fair to say that there is not one solution? If there's a solution that'll fix the problem in my area, north of St. Thomas, probably won't work in Bayham, and vice versa. Like, it's not one solution that's going to fix the whole county. Maybe small areas can benefit from this approach, and another area may be very simple for another way. Is that fair to say? Somebody agree with me? Mike,
If I could, I think it's fair to say, in part, unless you're talking about a full-blown 100% coverage of the county fiber solution, because that will work everywhere. If you're talking about a wireless hybrid solution, I think you're 100% right. Wireless, there's a lot of wireless customers and provision in Bayham today, the township I'm most familiar with, but it's brutal geography for wireless because it's probably, unabashedly, I'll say, the most beautiful township in Elgin County, but it's a rough township. It's solid, it's gullies everywhere, it's trees, rolling landscape, and it is not wireless friendly. So I think from that perspective, I would agree with you.
Julie?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Warden, or Deputy Warden, to the committee. So if we circle back to Councillor Jaguer's preference, I think maybe what we're hearing is that staff could be directed to gather more information from those municipalities who have this position in place. And that would respond to Councillor McPhail's concerns about, whether they are, and I quote, chasing their tails to try to get this information or to be successful in their roles. So we're happy to do some research into that position, which may increase committee members' comfort level with that option. We didn't hear any other options presented, so perhaps at this time, the committee may wish to just have the report presented to County Council as is, and then hear councillors' feedback.
I'm fine with that. Any other opinions on that? Duncan?
Well, certainly, I think that we can make a recommendation to county council, but I can just hear it in the room. Where's the money going to come from? And is that anything that this committee is going to worry about? Are we just going to make the recommendation, this is what we should do, and you people figure out where the money's going to happen from? You know that question's going to be asked.
Well, yeah.
And if I may, Duncan, do you mean the money for a position or for the money for any of the options?
Oh, I think just general, when there's a new expenditure coming along, and depending on what it is, I mean, I think we would have quite a challenge looking for what, $100 and some odd million from county council. People would be falling out of their chairs, but I mean, a position certainly maybe is somewhat different, but again, that question, and I don't think that this committee has the ability to recommend how anything's going to be financed. That's going to be up to county council through treasury and whatnot. They can do the magic. We have two directors in the room right now, so if it's a situation that the committee feels that that's our best step forward, and quite possibly I think I agree with you, Dominique, that if we're going to be serious about this, we need to keep moving on. Somebody's going to have to do that job. So I guess if that's the committee's recommendation going forward to county council, then it's going to be up to the committee members on county council certainly to speak to the issue and work through our treasury to come up with the funds. So I'm certainly ready to support that recommendation from my chair to county council that yes, if you're serious about this, this is what this committee has looked at and feels is the next logical step towards it.
Julie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you to committee members. So I think maybe what we'll do, because of the timing of meetings happening in the new year, is we'll put this recommendation forward to the budget committee and provide them with two scenarios so they can see both. Because I suspect that meeting might happen in advance of County Council's first meeting, January 11th. So I think that will keep things moving. And that way the Budget Committee can make a recommendation either in support of or against, whether it's financially.
It's all down to money.
Yeah, and to that end, I would say in terms of staff exploring and doing a bit of research, I would also like to suggest exploring within the Elgin County organization, combining it with some other economic development goals, like we've talked about the enterprise facilitator role, which I see a connection to that. And I think as much as, and I agree with the report that says you need a dedicated resource. So you don't want somebody who's doing this from the corner of their desk, but I think it could be complemented or, connected, no pun intended, to, other economic development initiatives and how we're reaching out to, businesses and so that we really, I would hate to just isolate connectivity as one issues and then, having different staff pursuing different issues in silos. So, and I think that would make the position easier to fund in some ways in that regard.
I certainly agree with that, Dominique. Just looking ahead, I think there's a real potential that the urgency is going to be back onto us with this next round of COVID. If the school board locks the kids home again, all of a sudden they're right back in, the demands up again. But Duncan?
Yeah, I really think that we are now currently at a crossroads. Certainly, I'm very happy to have been part of this committee, and I think the committee has done a pretty good job getting us to this point in time, along with the assistance from IBI. As they say, it's time for County Council to fish or cut bait, and I think that we need to support full-heartedly the work that this committee has done, and I think for a reason that we have to demonstrate not only to our residents, but we have to demonstrate to the ISOs that probably are looking at Elgin County as an investment. We also need to demonstrate to the province of Ontario through Infrastructure Ontario or Infrastructure Canada that this committee and through County Council is serious about improving the lot of broadband in Elgin County. And I think that we definitely need to make that statement that yes, we're serious and we're going to move forward and we're going to do what we can to provide broadband services to the residents of Elgin County.
Keith?
If I may, I just wanted to bring some additional emphasis to an important point I think that was raised, and that it is, in my opinion, important to embed this as part of your economic development strategy and fundamentally a pillar of your economic development strategy for business and resident attraction and retention and growth. So it doesn't become a position of just chasing broadband specific issues, but tying it in with the bigger attraction, land development, and private sector engagement strategy.
That's a very good point. I saw everyone's head nodding on that, so. More comments, or are we good? Mike?
Yeah, just this is a bit granular, I guess, at this point in this discussion. But if the report of IBI is going in to County Council, there's a couple of small items in the towards the end of the narrative regarding projects in play in Elgin. And there's one glaring mistake in there that I would like to see corrected. Actually, there's a comment in, I think it's West Elgin, not Dutton Dunwich. I think it was West Elgin that identifies Packet Works as the provider. Packet Works has no facilities in the county whatsoever. That's an NFTC build. I know Packet Works was involved in the build, but it is not it's not Packet Works, it's NFTC, and that should be corrected. So that's not added more confusion for council once they have a look at this. And the other thing, I guess, is a little more selfish on my part, but in the narrative that talks about the build that's underway in Bayham, it talks about fiber running from New England down to Port Burwell, and it has a map that covers the entire area, but it doesn't mention the leg that North Frontenac had committed to do from Stratfordville west to Richmond, which again is I just happen to live along that road, so it's near and dear to my heart. But I would rather see that written into the narrative as well, because it's a substantial piece of the build commitment that they made. It's on the map, but it's not in the narrative, Keith. If that could simply be added, just a reference to that fiber backbone from Stratfordville west to Richmond, so they don't forget about it, and they know we haven't forgotten about it out here.
Mhm. No, happy to make any corrections of errors that crept in. So if you wouldn't mind, Mike, just sending me a note directly on that, and we'll make sure that
I can do that.
it's accurate.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that, Julie.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the reminder, Mike. I meant to tell the committee that this report has been sent to all of the local administrators for their review and comment as well. So we haven't collected all of that feedback. I suspect there may be some minor tweaks associated with comments coming back from our local municipal partners. So when we have Keith incorporate any of those changes, we'll be sure to send a final draft out to the committee for your review.
All right, thank you for that. Warden French, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because this is my first meeting and I've just been listening to things that are happening at council, forgive me if you've already covered this. I just have a question. This isn't unique just to Elgin County. So I'm just wondering, have we learned anything about what other counties are doing? Because maybe we could get some other ideas of how to approach this. Maybe you've already done all that. I'm just curious.
Who can answer that? Julie, I remember a couple of years ago, we did get some information from Chatham Kent, the approach they were doing. So, and I to be honest, I don't know if they're making successful at it or wishing they've done different things. That'd probably be a good idea to ask. Julie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So early on in the process, we did explore best practices for some other municipalities who have undertaken this type of work. I would suggest that in many ways, Elgin County is blazing the trail. Keith and his team could probably comment on some of the work that they've done for other municipalities that is similar in nature.
Yes, thank you. So certainly, in closer proximity, certainly we've been very active and have quite a good understanding of York Region and Durham Region strategy, and many of their approach and activity is public domain within their website. So, you can certainly do some checking there. We've been involved with many other municipalities across the country, and certainly, our scope didn't include more of a peer review or industry review. Certainly, the recommendations that reflect what we feel are our best practices and best approach. So, but yeah, I'm happy to provide you a list of other municipalities, both within Ontario and nationally, that have undertaken similar initiatives.
Okay, thank you, Keith.
Are we ready to give Julie direction? Report go to the Finance Committee? That's agreeable to everyone?
I would suggest the Finance Committee and by extension County Council, just to ensure that that's covered in the motion.
All right. And I think we have a letter of correspondence, do we not? Remember?
A motion,
Oh, yes,
I would move that.
yes. Thank you for that, Duncan. Do we have a seconder for that motion? We'll make it a motion.
Can I just interject quickly, just to clarify? I think we have some staff direction to do some more research into the position itself, a dedicated position which supports option one. So in terms of coordinating how that is presented and to whom, I think we could use some committee direction. What is your preference? Is it that we prepare that information and then hold another meeting to review it? Or that information go to county council?
Duncan?
Again, I keep going back to whether you take it to budget committee or you take it to county council, the first question somebody's gonna ask is how much it's gonna cost. So we might as well have that up front and be able to answer it, because I think that it would not do us any good to have that first question asked and then be able to say, well, we don't know.
We do want to move this along, like, we don't want to,
Whatever the mechanics are.
Okay.
what's your thoughts, Jason?
Yeah, I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, if the report, I could see having two components, or I guess three components, kind of high level, what the responsibilities would be, how much it would cost, and what are other examples from municipalities who have done something similar. And that, I'm wondering, I think in the past, this committee, we've reviewed documents by email where you said, are you okay with this? And then if everybody's on email said, yep, this is good, then that report could go straight to the budget committee.
Almost like an electronic vote.
Yeah, I think we've endorsed other reports, like I'm thinking maybe the survey at one point, like the survey results or the questionnaire or things like that. So I don't know if that would help save time, if that fits with the proper governance.
I think the appropriate way to handle this through you, Mr. Chair, would be to circulate for comment, and then staff can take it from there and distribute it to the appropriate committees, whatever timing works. And if I may, we're in the midst of pretty intense times here as we deal with the pandemic and offering some supports locally for some issues and some staff holidays coming up. And I think timelines are pretty tight for this report. So I just want to try to manage committee's expectations for how comprehensive this report may be. I think we'll do our best, as we always do, but in order to get it onto the budget committee's and even county council's agenda, we're really tight on timelines, considering our office is closed between the 24th and January 4th. So we'll do our best, and I offer my commitment to that, but it may not be precisely to the level of detail that some of you are used to receiving from us.
I think that's perfectly acceptable. When we look how this COVID has changed in the last week, 10 days, and they're projecting the numbers by January 1st, which is only 2.5 weeks away, it's almost scary. So, I think suffice it to say we'll do our best, but we have to realize where we're at.
I would agree with that, and my apologies certainly if I made it sound like it should be a more comprehensive report. I think it's in response to Duncan's comments. It's a bit of chicken and egg. You don't want to develop it in full details, but you just want to just describe the picture, what is being proposed, just enough that council can envision it and can see how it would fit, or can see how it could be funded. So yeah, I think it's just whatever is feasible without, developing like a whole job description for example. It's really just pitching the concept. And if there's an appetite for that, then I could see going to a greater level of details.
For sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, we're happy to support that.
Okay. Now, is direction enough, or do you want a motion, or?
Well, I think that could be included within the motion if possible.
Can you draft a motion to read to us so we can be clear what we're voting on?
Just to be clear, is it going first to the budget committee and then to council?
Probably.
Whichever comes first, so you could say be presented to budget committee and or county council. Or and, both, just include both, yep.
Okay, so the motion is that the connectivity committee's recommended changes be incorporated into the Elgin County Broadband Recommendations Report from IBI Group, and that the recommendations contained in the report be presented to the Budget Committee and or County Council for consideration.
And I would just add to the end of that, that staff be directed to provide a report that explores best practices and option 1, and to include key responsibilities, costs associated with the position, examples of best practices, and sources of funding for review by the committee. And
You just got your marching orders.
That's just exactly how I would have worded it.
Jeff, go.
All right, we've heard the motion. I have a mover. Do I have a seconder, please? Second by Dominique. Are we clear on what we're voting on? Looks like everyone's agreeing to that. Catherine, please call the vote.
Mike Andrews,
Yes.
Counselor Jiguer,
Yes.
Counselor McPhail,
Yes.
Joshua Curia, Deputy Warden Marks.
Yes.
4-0, the motion is carried.
All right, thank you.
is it for,
Or sorry, 4-1, the motion is carried.
Correspondence? Is that our next? Wasn't the letter, wasn't there?
Email.
An email from Gwen Tracy. So that's just an item to note. Do we have anything under new business? Not seeing any. Date of our next meeting, should we leave that to call the chair, depending on where we're at in the new year? That fair enough? We don't know what's coming, so we have to have some flexibility. I think that's probably best. Before I ask for adjournment, do you have any other comments? All right, sir.
if I may?
Yes.
I would just reinforce to the committee that it's likely you can expect to receive some of this information by email the first week of January or after the 4th. And we would appreciate a quick turnaround on that review if at all possible. So bear with us. We'll do our best to get it to you as soon as possible, but do watch out for some information coming from us for your comment.
Thank you, Julie. If there's nothing further, certainly, as always, I want to thank everyone for their attention and attendance today. Certainly, it's just please stay safe and enjoy the holidays as much as possible. Thank you for being here today. Take care, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.